Hello, my name is Roger McArdell and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Ashton Bentley. Today I'd like to introduce you to our TX2 and DX2 Inter-connectivity Kit. Over the last few years, with the rise of Zoom and Teams and other platforms, we've seen a lot of people who'd like to use a laptop as a meeting room engine and then connect to a video bar and screen at the other end of the room. With USB-C on laptops these days, that is really quite difficult. But the TX2 and DX2 solution fixes that problem, but it's not just an extender, it's a complete meeting room solution. The TX2 and DX2 interconnectivity system consists of two boxes. At the table, we have the TX2 table hub, and at the other end of the room, adjacent to the screen and the video speaker bar, we have the DX2 room hub. The TX2 is fitted underneath the table, and this is where you connect your laptop. But before we do that, before we look at this box, let's look at the actual physical connection to the laptop. Now, if you read the USB-C specification, it says that the cable should be around about 6 inches long. So the first thing we created was a long cable. This is 2.5 meters, or around about 8.5 feet in length. But this is a fully specified USB-C cable, so it contains all of the USB-C signals. But it's unique because it also supports 100 watts of charging for your laptop. This end goes into the laptop itself, and the other end, as you can see, we have a screwed connector. Now, we all know that the USB-C is not a particularly robust connector, particularly in the meeting room environment. So what we've done is we've put a little screw on here, and this connects into the USB-C socket on the TX2 table hub, and as you can see, we can now screw it up, and that makes the whole connection nice and robust. So let's start with the TX2 table hub. So the TX2 table hub supports two laptop inputs, one on HDMI and one on USB-C. And this is where our cable plugs into here. As you can see, we've got some black lines along here, and that's because our network port and our power port are dedicated only to the USB-C socket. If you're running a Teams call, you're probably going to need some decent bandwidth and some decent power to run your laptop. So we have a dedicated port here for the USB-C cable, which is a gigabit network port. We can charge your laptop to 100 watts, and we have a power supply that then plugs into this socket here. For legacy laptops, we have standard HDMI. And then, because there are requirements now to either have a monitor on the table or to have some kind of HDMI ingest, we also have an output port. So whichever connection is then live going into our inputs will also appear on the output here. Next in line, we have our RJ45 ports. The first one, the pink one, is our connection over to the DX2 room hub. We've already mentioned the network, and then finally we have our AppNet port. Now, Ashton Bentley manufacture a number of peripheral devices, such as a small LED touch panel, and this plugs into this port here. It's essentially a data bus with power on it, but it allows all kinds of peripherals to be connected. And then after this, we have some status indicators, so you can see the health of the unit, what the connections are doing, and also a firmware heartbeat. As you can see, the unit is very small. We have a number of holes and connections, so it can be screwed up very easily, or it can fit into an Ashton Bentley table leg. The TX2 table hub then connects through to the DX2 room hub via a single Cat7 cable. Now, this isn't just a USB-C extender, this is a complete room system, a complete room AV system in one small box. And as you can see, the form factor is exactly the same as a TX2. It's very small, it's very light, which means it can be either put into an Ashton Bentley chassis or hidden up behind a screen. So let's start with the connectors here, and we'll tell you what each one does. Now, first things first is we've actually got a little OLED display here. There's nothing more frustrating than going into a meeting room, trying to do some configurations and having no feedback back from the device. So this little indicator here gives you things like IP address, gives you status information, firmware levels and things like that. So for ongoing maintenance and support, it just makes the whole thing a lot easier. Once again, similar to the TX2, we've got some status indicators, and that will give you connectivity status and firmware heartbeat. Let's move up to the other end of the box here, where we've got our USB output sockets. Now, these are divided into two areas. The one with the yellow around it is permanently powered, which means if you need USB power for some reason, for something like an IR bug, that can just plug in there and work. Device ports 2 and 3 have what we call hot plug detect power switching. Now, this means that this box will basically work with any type of loudspeaker bar, video bar that you may have, and it will always make sure that those devices enumerate over USB properly, and that's done via unique hot plug detect power switching, which is on these ports. The next thing we have is a HDMI matrix. Now this box contains a matrix, and the TX2 table hub also contains a matrix. End to end, the full system is full 4K 444 60 Hz, completely uncompressed. So it's the highest quality of video we can get. Now, we've obviously got our table inputs with our laptops at the table, but sometimes it's nice to have other peripheral devices, for example a room PC, at the other end of the room. And so for this we have two auxiliary inputs, and then this box can drive two screen outputs. In most scenarios that will be, say, one screen, and it could be the input to a loudspeaker bar or something like that, or two screens. So full matrix on here. Our pink port is what connects over to the TX2 table hub, and once again that's our Cat7 single cable. Now this box contains a web server and a number of other tools to allow it to connect out to a management platform of some description, and that's via the network port that is on here, and we'll cover off the web server and how the settings are done a little bit later on in this video. And once again we have our ABNet port here so that we can have other peripherals. For example, we have a USB-C switch, we have a proximity detector and some other items that just plug in on this bus here. If we move around to the end of the box, we have more connectivity here. So first of all, this is our power input. Now the TX2 also powers the DX2 also powers the TX2, and so you just need the single power connection here. We have two screen control ports. These are serial control ports for controlling screens, and we have quite a large number of screen control codes actually built into this box, so you don't have to do any custom programming. These are on 3.5mm jacks because Ashton Bentley screens by default have 3.5mm jacks, and it's a very quick and simple and easy way to connect the cables up, and of course the cables are dirt cheap and readily available. We also still control legacy codecs, so we've still got a lot of our customers who are using things like Cisco codecs, and we have two ports here for controlling those. The first one is a standard 9-pin D serial port, and this can control something like a Polycom Group 500 or other legacy codecs, but also the box itself can be controlled over RS-232 as well. And then we have a dedicated Cisco control port. Now on a Cisco codec, it's USB over, it's RS-232 over USB, and that is connected on this port here, so that's dedicated to Cisco codecs. So as you can see, it's a complete room system. So we've got matrix switching, we've got codec control, we've got screen control, but the whole thing is configurable via its built-in web page. The DX2 contains a built-in web server which is used to configure the device and set all of the settings. It is accessed via a standard browser on your laptop and is password protected. Our first tab are settings, and these are the global settings within the unit itself. So first of all, we can select the type of screen that will be controlling using RS-232, or we can use Consumer Electronics Control, CEC, also to control the screen. If we're using a hardware codec, that is selected up here. As you can see, we have a number of standard units. Each of the outputs on the system, and there's three outputs, two on the DX2 room hub and one on the TX2 table hub, each of the outputs has a scaler, and these scalers can be turned on and off as required. The system also supports HDCP, which is high definition copy protection. Once again, these can be switched on and off on an individual basis on each input. Down here we configure the inputs and also the auto switching capabilities. One of the unique features of the product is the ability to completely define the routing and the configuration for each one of the inputs. We've got 4 inputs, plus we've got video conferencing mode, which is triggered by a codec API and also system off. And for each one of these modes, we can select what the screen does, what each of the matrix does, what the codec does, and also UX control for our external USB switch and the built-in USB hub. To aid installation and also for diagnostics, we've given you a manual control page. Here you can completely manually select the matrices and switch with those. You can switch between the different modes. You can turn the USB port power on and off, and also you can operate a connected display. And then finally, on the System tab, once you've fully configured the system, you can download that config for use on other boxes, or to clone other boxes, or to keep a record of the configuration. You can also undertake a factory reset, reboot the system, and also upload firmware to any of the connected boxes.